Riots, arson attacks on public and private property, and above all, terrorism. Shooting at civilians, firing on armed forces and police are things no country would tolerate. I hope that some countries that have taken very misguided positions will pay attention to the realities on the ground.
Look, one death is too much, but I hear much lower numbers and then I hear much higher numbers, but I say save their names because they'll pay a very big price.
Well, joining me now is exiled Iranian Crown Prince, His Royal Highness Reza Pahlavi. Your Royal Highness, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
You are in contact with people on the ground inside Iran?
As much as possible in the last 72 hours. As you know, it's been very difficult to access people, but every now and then information gets to us. I was able the night before last to have a FaceTime moment with a few of the people who came right off the street to tell us how the situation was on the ground. I mean, awe and admiration in the courage that they have displayed. But the sad news is that we had more casualties in the last 2 days, 4 times the number of people who were dead as a result of the 9/11 terrorist attack.
We're trying to get our head around that. What is the number? That
about 12,000 plus.
12,000 plus.
That's what we get so far. It might be more, but that's the minimum number that we know so far have been
killed by the regime. This is not arrested. This is killed.
We are talking about using military weapons, AK-47s, armored trucks to shoot to kill unarmed protesters. Their bodies are being picked up by bulldozers, and they charge each family for the bullet to be able to just retrieve the remains. It's abhorrent what's happening.
Obviously, we have no way to verify that independently. We've had reports of 3,000, 4,000 plus. The president's talked about thousands. And he said that it's crossing this red line, and he's going to make a decision. You've been on record before opposing U.S. military intervention in Iran. Are your views different today?
Brett, when you have civilians being murdered, massacred in a war that is waged against them by their own government, when the regime orders troops to fire on unarmed crowds, defenseless people, the only way they have a chance to have an equal playing field to overcome this regime is when they cannot neutralize this repressive force. Some additional help is needed. I don't look this as an aggression to a country. I'm talking about helping a nation liberate itself by giving them assistance that cannot otherwise obtain on their own. That's why it's critical and empowering, where the message of strength says we are not going to stand for this and we will not turn our back on these people. What the president said was so energizing, and it caught like wildfire, and people are going back to the streets to continue the fight.
You had a meeting with the peace envoy, Steve Witkoff, over the weekend. Is that correct?
But I'm not going to discuss the people we are in touch with out of respect for the administration. These are sensitive moments. But what I can tell you is that what the president has said has been extremely energizing to the people. The Iranian people count on this president to follow through on his promise that he made. And this is something that will keep them hopeful that this time they're not going to be thrown under the bus as they have before.
So getting from point A, where we are, to point B, if the regime, as some people suggest, collapses and the protesters have this moment, what is the model for success? What is the country that you have in mind, or your other protesters have in mind, the model for success?
You know, the only way that we can have the ability as a nation to determine our own future is within a democratic process of free election, the formation of a constitutional assembly where the future form of a democratic secular system can be debated and determine what its final form could be. So in the process of transition post-collapse, we have to have a plan of action, which we do. I have a comprehensive plan that addresses what needs to happen during that transition, how are we going to manage that process, what is the responsibility of an interim government to set the stage for that, and at the end, let the Iranian people, in complete transparency, debate what it is that ultimately they would like to opt for.
But you yourself haven't been there since 1978, is that correct?
1978 was when I left Iran for the last time.
Is there a team on the ground? Are there people? You don't have an army. How does this happen?
It's a combination of people who are inside Iran right now that are members of civil society. There are lawyers, experts, economists, university people. We're talking about a very strong polity that despite this regime have been able to survive all these years, and they need to step in to fill the void. A lot of people are ready to step in. There's a counterpart outside that in a sort of hybrid system can help one another in that process. And I think the important thing is to be able to protect their identities to the very end so they're not prematurely exposed, which is why it's not so obvious that we can ask them to, show up and not be immediately endangered. So we have to be very careful about that. But we are constantly in dialogue with them, preparing that transfer. So as soon as this regime collapses, we can immediately engage those forces within and constitute all the elements that will contribute to that.
I know you had
transition.
some meetings on Capitol Hill. Were those positive? I mean, do you get good sense from the lawmakers?
I think that many lawmakers on the Hill, regardless of which party they represent, understand how critical it is, especially if you want to promote liberty and democracy, that Western democracies, the US at the top of the list, have a crucial role to play to support freedom-seeking nations. And I think they understand that beyond just word of encouragement or condemnation, we have reached a point where some action is needed. Regardless of what the executive branch wants to do, the legislative side has to be in support of anything that can empower a nation, because at the end of the day, it's about empowerment. It's about giving a nation. And we've seen that before. How did apartheid come to an end? Right. How did the Soviet Union collapse?
But we also saw it in the Green Revolution, which didn't develop, and there was criticism that we as the U.S. didn't do enough to help on the ground. 2009.
It is true.
Do you think this is the tipping point?
It is very different.
Is the moment?
It is very different, Brett, because the demand now is not just economic hardship or shortcomings or lack of liberalization. We have come to the point where people are just fed up with this regime. They are saying death to the dictator. They want to liberate themselves. And their demand for freedom is met with the most brutal reaction by a regime that is waging war on its own citizens. How else can we liberate ourselves when there's such degree of pressure without having, at some point, an element of backing and support from free nations that stand on the right side of history? Do not throw us under the bus by trying to negotiate or appease a regime that for 47 years has brutalized our nation.
Well, it's interesting to hear the president talk, and we'll see what